Hi, this is Les Posen, Fear of Flying clinical psychologist. It's July 2020, towards the end of July. Here in Melbourne, we are in stage 3 lockdown, which means you are not permitted to leave your home unless it's for a particular purpose, such as shopping or going to work, but you're not allowed to visit friends, you can't go for a long drive, but you are allowed to exercise. However, if you are outside your home, going about your business to do that shopping or go to work, you must wear a mask, or in my stage, I would prefer to wear a face shield, which for me is an easier thing. There is a distinction between the two, of course. Mask goes across your face like so, and it's really there in case you have yet to be diagnosed, but maybe you're symptomatic, from spreading it to other people. It's contained here as a stopping device from things getting into you. It's not as good as a face shield, which goes here and all around, which means the droplets won't get into your eyes as well. So for me, being in a risk category, I prefer to wear the face shield, even though it looks a bit dorky. But I'd rather be a live dorky person than a dead fashionista. So, how are you doing? We are in difficult times. I've booked 3 times to go on a flight on my own to interstate, and each time that the time has come to go on that flight, I've received a cancellation notice from the airline saying that flight is not on, we'll put you on another one, or it's not happening at all. And the reason I wanted to go on these flights is to see how the airlines locally are handling the virus situation before I start taking patients. I haven't taken a patient on a flight since March 2020. And that was certainly the last time that I flew. So we're in tough times. Mind you, there are many people who are still wishing to do something about their fear of flying, especially not in Australia so much, but in the United States and in Europe, where flying is still occurring. Here in Australia, it's very, very restricted. But there are still people wishing to do something about their fear of flying, and also people who are local who wish to do something about their fear of flying in readiness, because there's a pent-up energy. You can kind of feel that people would like to go to places just to get away from the humdrum, day in, day out kind of stuff that they're doing. Today, or in this particular video, it's one of 3 that I want to put together in fairly quick succession, in order for you, if you have a fear of flying, or in fact any other anxiety disorder or any other anxiety presentation. It doesn't have to be a disorder that would be diagnosable, but it's just an anxiety state that's getting in the way. I want you to get a bit of a clue about how we're going to go about helping you out and doing something about this. Some people will need more, of course, than just a YouTube video, and that will sort of get you thinking about what to do, and some people will need to actually follow this up and maybe see a psychologist that's local. Here in Australia, by the way, there's been a change of how we can see people. We're no longer restricted. In fact, we're encouraged not to see people face to face, and to see people the way I'm doing it now, over live video conferencing. So yes, we're using a lot of Zoom and Microsoft Teams and Skype and FaceTime, and our federal government has allowed our Medicare system, which is a form of socialized medicine, to allow people to be seen both by their general practitioner, their primary care physician, and their psychologist over telehealth. That's going to continue towards the end until September, when the hope is that we can get past all this. I think not. I think it's going to continue past September, but there you go. So people are using this from all over Australia to visit me on Zoom, or however we might want to do it. So in today's session, I want to sort of talk to you a little bit about how to get your head around some of the basic concept of dealing with anxiety. So it's almost anxiety 101. Anytime you are going to see a fairly modern oriented psychologist to receive some help with anxiety, you are almost certainly going to be given an educational session along the way about the biology of the fear response and the threat response. That's a given. Some psychologists will also work in kind of long-term ways, and they will make the suggestion that your anxiety really has a rather deep internal conflict kind of basis to it. And if it comes out as a fear of flying or snakes or heights, it really is more just an outward manifestation of a very long-held internal conflict. I tend not to think that way for most of the patients that I see. I am much more interested in what's your current presentation and what's maintaining your current presentation. That is, how is it that you've changed possibly from being someone who really liked flying to someone who's really become quite apprehensive. Flying, substitute elevators, public speaking, dogs, driving, whatever it might be, substitute it, because it's the same kind of process that we're going to work with. It's called a trans-diagnostic process. It's going to work across a variety of presentations. For other people, they've never been a good flyer, and it's just gotten worse as time has gone on. And for other people, all of a sudden, out of the blue, it's gotten worse. I just couldn't take that last flight. And maybe it's to do with a change of job, or I've just had a new baby, or I'm about to get married. There's a whole variety of big life changes that can occur. No matter what the etiology, as we call it, no matter what the presentation, it's still going to be really important that you understand your threat response and how it's initiated and what's keeping it going, but most importantly, how to change that and to try and kind of recalibrate it so it comes back to a reasonable kind of threat response where it's an appropriate level of what's going on and the appropriate thing to do. Okay? The inappropriate thing to do is probably going to be to avoid doing what you'd like to be doing, knowing that I really should be able to do this, or have a reaction which you know is way out of proportion, so that you can engage in what we call a freeze response or an avoidance response, which can include the introduction of safety behaviors, which can either be ritualistic, I've got to check, I've got to count, I've got to have a lucky charm with me, I've got to check the weather all the time, all of which you know kind of doesn't really help, but nonetheless I'm not willing to give up those behaviors. So we're going to be looking at that in one of the other sessions coming up. Today I want to give you a bit of a guide as to how to think about anxiety, especially seeing it as a subjective experience, what it feels like to have your threat response initiated. When our brains were evolving, hundreds of thousands of years ago from our mammalian ancestors, what we do have in common with them is a biological response that helps us deal with threats. Threats can be things that we've experienced directly and we were lucky enough to escape from, in which case somewhere along the way we decide in our kind of very simple way, before language is around, I'm not going to that place again, or I'm not going out at that time of day when that event happened, or even if something looks like what attacked me last time, I'm not even going to go there. So if it's a four-legged hairy animal, I'm going to avoid that at all costs. Okay? And that's a pretty smart brain that doesn't have to wait until it happens all over again to say, well, I better not do that. It's a learning brain. Okay? When language comes along, maybe 80,000 years ago, perhaps, we're able to predict things because language allows us to contemplate things past, what's happening now, and contemplate what might happen in the future. That's what language allows us to do, so we can plan. It also allows us to make some leaps. So think about the meerkat that sits on top of the hill on the lookout, always like this, always, and making little clicking noises or sounds to bring the other animals up in case there's a dangerous predator around, in which case we'll all duck back into our little burrows. So we're like this. Inside of us, we have a kind of inner meerkat, as I call it, and it's part of a midbrain emotional system, which we call the midbrain, the limbic system. And one of the important elements of that midbrain is called the amygdala. It's ancient Greek for almond, the people who were kind of first discovering how this amygdala played a role in our responses back in the 1920s or 30s, working with rhesus monkeys and also with dogs and with rats. were able to see that if you destroyed the amygdala, an animal would still hold on to its old fears, but it couldn't learn new fears. In other words, fears are distributed throughout the brain, what it is to be afraid of. But in order to learn new fears, you have to have an intact amygdala. In human beings, if that amygdala is destroyed through a tumour or injury, or you happen to be one of those unfortunate people who has a genetic condition which sees your amygdala calcify and therefore lose its functionality, you have the same thing happening. You remember old fears, but you can't learn new fears. You keep putting yourself back in danger. There's a bit of a problem. One of the tasks we have with this amygdala is to recognize that it's quick and dirty. It joins up dots extremely quickly. In Australia, I grew up with a TV show on our national broadcaster called Mr. Squiggle, who was a puppet. And people would send in half-completed drawings, and he would use his long HB pencil nose to sort of draw it and fit it and complete the picture by joining up the lines, and sometimes he'd turn it upside down. You can have a look at this video as I'm talking to you, which on YouTube you can see this. Kids in Australia grew up with this sort of stuff.
But you left my hand go, Miss Pat.
Oh, well, look, I just had to pick up the squiggles.
Oh,
Here you are, come on.
I can't do squiggles there, Miss Pat.
Yes, you can, Andy. Oh, look, we better get rid of all this cushion, I think. There you are. Now, are you quite comfortable?
Yes, thank you, Miss Pat.
There you are. This comes from Meredith Swain. Do you like it?
Oh, yes, Miss Pat. How's that? There.
Very good.
It's an easy one, isn't it,
Is
Miss
it a
Pat?
cat?
No, Miss Pat.
It's an owl.
That's right, Miss Pat. How did you guess?
Well, I saw those two eyes.
There. How's that, Miss Pat?
It's very good. I
You
like
don't
it.
like that, Miss Pat?
I said I liked it.
Ah, well, the owl doesn't give a hoot, you know.
Oh, it doesn't?
No.
Oh.
Actually, Miss Pat, he doesn't want to be an owl.
He doesn't.
No.
Ah, he does want to be a cat.
That's it, Miss Pat.
I guessed the first time, didn't I?
Yes, Miss Pat.
It's also a bit like those puzzles where you can sort of join the dots, and you join the numbers, paint by the numbers. You go in by the numbers, and eventually you get to see what this object is. Your amygdala is a bit like that. It joins up the dots very quickly, and it makes a guess just on a couple of dots being joined what it is I'm confronting. And what it's trying to do is get you to recognize, is this thing dangerous or not dangerous? And if you assume it is dangerous, what's the right thing to do, having recognized that it's dangerous? Should I flee? Is it best to freeze? So maybe I'll sort of momentarily disappear from that animal's gaze because I'm not moving and not breathing. Should I fight it? Well, maybe I can beat it off, but maybe when my fear response was developing 100,000 years ago, I was a pretty weak sort of species. So fight, as much as people talk about it, is not really the go. Or maybe I'll try and appease it. Maybe as language becomes available, I'll try and talk it down and say, look, I'll be okay, and I'm sorry I didn't mean this. This as language becomes available to us. You can actually see this happening with dogs in the park. One will run up to another one and then sort of momentarily freeze, then they'll sort of lie there and expose itself and appease the more dominant dog, saying, look, I'm no threat to you. So part of the task we have in learning how to appease or tell our amygdalas to stand down and be at ease is to recognize that certain things do happen around us. They will trigger an immediate response. Some of those things are hardwired into us. It's pretty hard to stop it happening. Something coming towards you and you duck, a loud noise. But other things such as the whirring of engines on a plane or the bouncing of the wings as you look out the window, these are learnt responses. But they are predicated on old responses such as falling, as I've discussed in previous videos, or a really loud noise, or maybe even a loss of control when you walk on board that plane and I just have to sit here and this feels very uncomfortable. I have to lose control, or I perceive I've lost control. One of the things that you want to be aware of moving forward with your regaining control of what you can control is the language that you use when you're confronted with one of these situations. And as it happens, we don't need to have a very long sentence to bring our amygdala into action. We just have to join up the dots very quickly. And most languages will have a series of exclamations or expressions which will trigger that amygdala into action. It can be, oh my God, or the use of a swear term, WTF, for instance, or bloody hell, bugger this, and worse or stronger. I want to suggest to you that you don't have to finish off the sentence. All your amygdala needs is you to have these critical words, and it goes into threat response mode. Okay? These just might be classic phrases that you use, and then you go on to your business doing something else. But as soon as you use these expressions, bang, you switch on. And the reason why I think it's very similar to our modern devices like Alexa and Siri is that we don't have to any longer, with those devices, press buttons to activate these voice recognition systems, these artificial companions, if you like. At one stage, when Siri, for instance, was first introduced on the iPhone, you actually had to physically press a button down, and or the unit had to be powered up, because having an always-on monitoring system used up a lot of battery power. Well, as the iPhone evolved and battery power got more efficient, it changed over so that it's always on. You can switch that off, of course. So it's always listening in the environment, and so is my Alexa device. It may even be that if you've got an Alexa nearby and it hears me saying Alexa, it'll switch on. So I can sit here, and I've got an Alexa device sitting down here. If I speak up, but you'll hear it. Alexa, what's the weather like in New York tomorrow?
Tomorrow in New York, United States, there will be partly sunny weather, with a high of 33 degrees Celsius and a low of 23 degrees.
So she's always on, and Siri works the same way. I can tell her to play some music and then tell her to stop. Watch. Alexa, play some Dusty Springfield.
Dusty Springfield from Apple Music.
Alexa, stop. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to tell your amygdala, like you can with Alexa or Siri, just to stop or go to the next track? Alexa, play some Burt Bacharach. I'm showing my age now, aren't I?
Burt Bacharach from Apple Music.
Alexa, next. Alexa, next. Alexa, stop. So it's not just a simple off-on. You can go to next. What's the next thing to do? The task with your Meerkat, with your Alexa, with your Siri, is to know what instructions to give it to be able to either get it to stand down and not participate in what's going on now, or move to the next instruction. The next instruction might be, let's figure out a plan for working this out. So maybe I do need some energy in the system. Don't shut down the energy by distraction or closing your eyes or putting on distracting music. Let's stay with the energy and use that energy to work out a plan. Watch an Olympic class weightlifter as he or she is about to lift some heavy weight. They'll be walking up and down the stage, beating themselves, hitting their face, rubbing the resin in, walking back, addressing the bar. Not ready? Okay, walk back and then go, because they've got to get a maximum amount of energy into the system to recruit as much muscle fiber as possible to lift that weight up until they get the 3 white lights and then drop it. And then they go into recovery mode. So in the next section, having introduced you to this concept of stand down at ease, switch off the alarm, or recall the alarm as pilots would say, in other words, stop it making all this noise so we can formulate and carry out the plan. In the next section of our work, in another video I'm going to do in a couple of days' time, I want to teach you the next most important part about anxiety, and that's not learning how to be calm. That's the biggest mistake you can make. Well, maybe not the biggest. It's a misleading element that lots of people are very happy to teach you how to do relaxation and how to just sort of sizzle down a little bit and be mindful. And I don't believe this is the way to go. What? I don't believe it's the way to go. I believe you need to be able to get up and bring yourself down. You need to be able to bring on and confront the challenges, deal with them adequately. That doesn't mean coming down from a 9 to a 0, but maybe a 9 to a 7, and then a 7 to a 4, and that's about as far as you want to take it. And then go into recovery mode. Okay, on a long flight across, say, America, LA to New York, It's not good enough to be able to say, well, I got through the first bout of turbulence or the first sense of loss of control. What happens if it returns every hour or multiple times? You need to know that I can go up, manage, recover. And that's what we're going to do in the next video. So I hope you've enjoyed this little introduction to this next phase of what we're going to be doing to help you with anxiety, not just about fear of flying, but about other things. So stay with it. You'll learn a lot in these next couple of videos. Bye for now.